That's what I don't get about the announcers these days. I'm like, well, that's all you do is announce.
Your days had to be, 18 hours long for TV days? It was crazy.
I'll correct you there because you're wrong, but go ahead. I believe if I lost, I would have had to say I'm a fat piece of shit.
Who was your benefactor?
No idea.
It's 20 years. You can let the cat out of the bag.
Why would I do that?
I believe it was Shane McMahon.
Let me say this about the race, Coach. You did lose the bet.
And we are here once again. Welcome into your favorite WWE and pro wrestling storytime show. We call it Behind the Turnbuckle. I am the coach. He is Big Tommy C. And Tommy, first and foremost, we got to thank everybody for making last week's episode such a huge success. DDP and Cody Rhodes, it's still getting tons of views to this day. Big time, right?
Coach, I watched that interview 3 times, and it's so riveting, some of the stuff that Cody was saying. I hope everybody got to see it because the questions that were asked and the answers that he came up with were just amazing. I've never seen in any other interview. I think we had one of the best interviews with Cody Rhodes ever, and I implore everybody to please check it out. It is unbelievable. He is an amazing man, and there's a reason why he's number one. Now, speaking of that, we have a character today who's not number one.
No, but we started this show, and anybody that's been with us since the start, and we're getting so many more. By the way, if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. You want to get all the content, and we're going to add more content. But we started this for everybody, Tommy, not just the big superstars like Cody Rhodes or DDP.
Right.
We've already had Johnny Photo. We've already had Jimmy Corderas referee. And today, one of the biggest, and I say this with all the love in the world, goofballs in the history of the WWE, former ring announcer Tony Chimel. And if anybody's watched from the late 90s through the 2000s, the voice of SmackDown and some nights on Raw was Tony Chimel. He'll be here in a couple of minutes. But he was the most lovable goofball backstage, maybe of anybody we've ever worked with, Tommy.
Absolutely, Coach. Backstage, I sat ringside with him where him and Mark Eaton would get 2 hot dogs a night. I'm like, guys, in a year, you guys are going to be dead. And he would just laugh it off. Carlucci, shut up, or something like that. But I had a great time with him. He was a great, true friend to both of us, and I can't wait to start this interview.
All right, well, let's get it started. By the way, Mark Yaton is the guy. Everybody always asks us, who's the guy that throws Stone Cold all those beers that he catches all those years? His name, Mark Yaton. Maybe we'll have him on the show somewhere down the line. But for the here and the now, hopefully we can get through this because Tony Chimel is one of a kind. So without further ado, joining the show for the very first time, ladies and gentlemen, the ring announcer. He calls himself the GOAT, Tony Chimel. Ladies and gentlemen, there are hidden gems in this world of professional wrestling, and our guest this week is not one of them, but he has made the cut, and he is former WWE ring announcer, one of my favorite human beings on planet Earth, and he's been around for damn near over 35, 40 years. I don't know how long it is. Tony Chimel, welcome to Behind the Turnbuckle. You're welcome. How are you, sir?
Oh, thank you. You're welcome, Coach. And Tommy, what's going on?
All right, so here's the deal. Before we get into your career, because people are absolutely going to love your stories, what are you up to in 2024? Educate us.
Well, my main job now is I work at Trader Joe's grocery store. If people don't know what that is, but I love that place and I love working there. And I also work for AEW a couple times a month. I love working there as well. And that still keeps me a little bit in the wrestling scene and a little bit on the road and stuff like that. So I don't travel the way I used to, which is I'm very happy about because I don't want to. But I love both gigs now that I do them.
Tony, we have a lot to talk about. In your crazy career, take us back how it was like in your WWE career.
Yeah, I mean, things were a lot different. I mean, when I first started, it was very small, and we just drove around in the ring truck, me and Joey Morella, which I owe that family a lot for actually getting me started in this business. And still in contact with Mrs. Morella and their family today. But it was me and Joey, and we would drive around in a ring truck, a small little truck, drive to towns near our house, like Scranton or Philly, Washington, Baltimore, Harrisburg, stuff like that, and just set up a ring. And they would have matches and tear the ring down and either drive home or drive to the next town.
So that was your first job with WWE?
Yeah, yeah. And I was maybe
Wow.
21, 22 years of age.
And
The
Joey
first,
Morello was Gorilla Monsoon's son, right?
that's
Correct.
correct. Yes. Yeah. And they lived down the street from me. That's how I got involved in it.
So that's how you got into the business, right? Correct?
Yeah, yeah, we grew up together. I didn't they moved in the neighborhood right down the street from us when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. Joey was probably like 5 or 6 maybe.
Wow.
And we just grew up being friends and buddies, and there's a bunch of us in the neighborhood, and we'd play, whatever sport was around. We'd play street hockey or football or basketball or baseball and all that. And we just grew up together and went to school together and all that. So
You tell the story like, oh, I just drove a ring truck. But back in the day when you and Tommy started, it wasn't just like WWE called you. How did you get into the world of wrestling to drive the ring truck to start your career?
well, I believe before Vince McMahon's dad died, Vince Senior owned part of the company, and I think Gorilla owned some of it,
Mhm.
and Arnie Skolin owned some of it, and there was a guy out in
Oh.
Harrisburg named Phil Zatko who owned some
Yep.
of it. And Gorilla had a ring, so Gorilla would have somebody driving the truck around and stuff like that because we were still young. So once we turned around 18, 19 years of age, Gorilla let Joey drive the truck around, stuff like that. And one day it was like, well, I guess Gorilla, when Vince's dad died, Vince Jr. took over and he bought, I guess, the shares out from Gorilla and Arnie and this Phil Zatko guy. So Gorilla didn't have the ring anymore. But a couple weeks later, Vince called Gorilla up and said, "Hey, does your son want to work for me? Does Joey want to work for me to set the ring up? And he can bring a buddy to help him set the ring up." So Joey chose me, and
Oh,
that's how
wow.
we
Wait a
started
second. You
working
didn't have
for
any friends
Vince.
back then. We all know you had no friends back then. Don't act like you did. Don't
He
act
owed
like
me
you
a
did.
favor, maybe.
What does something like that pay? Because you weren't on camera, you weren't doing ring announcing, you were just setting the ring up. What kind of money could you make?
When I first started, no, we were hired as employees. We had to go up to Connecticut, up to Stanford. We got signed all the paperwork. We got hired by it was Titan Sports back then, but Joey was making $20,000 a year, and I was making 16,000.
Wow.
What?
1983,
Wow.
November of 1983. So almost
Holy.
November.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And then I remember a few years later when Joey got off the ring and just was refereeing, I got to take over the ring truck and I was the head guy and I got to make the 20 grand. Yeah.
Oh, my
Let's
God.
go. Let's go. So that's how you got in. So that's how you got in. But then let's talk about the schedule because back in the day we didn't have cable like we do today, or even in the 2000s. So it was more the house shows set up TV, and it was just the grind. What was the schedule like then?
actually, actually, it was like TV kind of set up the house shows because the house shows is where the big matches were. So you would see like Hulk Hogan wrestle somebody like King Kong Bundy at the house shows. And then at TV, you would see King Kong Bundy squash some jobber dude. So that made the heel the big guy, and Hogan would just run through these guys. You do we'd run like the Capitol Center in Washington every month, Baltimore every month, Philly every month, Scranton every month. So one month you'd see Hogan wrestle King Kong Bundy, and it was a double disqualification or something. So the next month they'd come back with the same match, but it was like no disqualifications or something, and then it wouldn't get settled then either. Then the third month would be maybe like a steel cage match, so they could run their little programs every month at these live events, and then at TV they would just show the big squash matches. And then, of course, after a while, it reversed, and it's like they're having really good matches on TV where people want to watch. And the house shows still had good matches, but you didn't get the belts changing hands and stuff like that at house shows.
In the 90s and 2000s, we all know it was a grind. We all worked it. Me, you, coach, everybody. We did TVs and everything like that. We had 2 tours, eight shows a week. What was that grind like for you guys being on the ring crew, man?
Yeah, well, because now once it started growing and Vince had a ring crew, we were like the Philly, New Jersey area. They had a crew up in New England. They had a crew in Chicago. They had a crew in like Florida, California, and stuff like that. So we had ring guys all over the place. And depending on where the show was, you would do that area. We would probably go anywhere from, like sometimes we would even do Boston because the other ring guys were maybe in another show in Maine, and they couldn't get from one to the other, or, sometimes they'd even run 2 shows a day. I remember they would do double shots on the weekend. They would do like Philly and Baltimore, or they do Washington and, Philly or something like that.
Tony, many people don't realize that in the late 90s and 2000s, when all of us were together, I've always called you one of the laziest human beings I've ever been around. But you had to be there first thing in the morning to set up the crew, and then you started ring announcing, and you became one of the iconic voices in the Attitude Era in WWE history. Your days had to be, 18 hours long for TV days? It was crazy.
Oh yeah, it was brutal, and yeah, I would the announcing gig. That's what I don't get about the announcers these days. I'm like, well, that's all you do is announce. I was like, that was like. I can work that gig. Just give me a 3-hour show or a 2-hour show or whatever it is they're running, and that's all I have to do. Yeah. I would be in great shape, coach, if that's all I had to do. But instead, I had
easy with the great shape. Easy with the great shape. Well, we'll get into that shape at the end of the interview.
I'd be in better shape. But I would walk into an arena at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and then pick out what rooms, who's going to go where, what's going to go where in what room, and all this other stuff, and then go through my whole production office stuff and do that, and deal with tens of thousands of dollars with people getting things for the show and all that, and then have to go do my around 3, 4 o'clock when rehearsals would start. I would get into announcer mode and do that stuff, and then go back to the production office and do some more production stuff, and then go and do the show, and then maybe after the show do some tear down some rooms and tear down the production office and all that. So,
Tommy, you remember what we hated the most is when we would ask for something and they go ask Chimel in the production office. That was like death for us. Yes. Like, oh my, but we knew where he's parking his big old butt. And that was in the production office all day. Remember that, Tommy?
The first thing I would ask him is like, "Where's my international room?" Oh, God, no printer in there, no nothing. Oh, it was incredible, man.
The merch guys would hate it, and they still get on my case about it because they would come in and they're like, "Chimel, we got a FedEx package. Do you know where it is?" And I'm like, "Do you have the tracking number?" No. I said, "Do you know who sent it?" No. Do you know who it's addressed to? No. Okay, so you want me to do all of your work and find the package too? I mean, it was like ridiculous, and they still get on my case, today. And I'm like, yeah, because I made you guys do your job, and I'll help you find the package, but come with some information, and we would have. They think that the only box coming to an arena is their merch stuff. When, in all reality, in some places, you'd have hundreds of stuff that's got shipped there.
So let's talk about the craziness that we had because right now, the three of us, I mean, it's like going down memory lane, and if people weren't there, it was such a beautiful, beautiful time of silliness and shenanigans. So pre-tapes court and wrestlers court, and I believe you were on trial in both, if I remember correctly. What was the day like when we were just acting a fool all day? What did you enjoy about that the most?
Well, I love playing cards when I think that we were doing Raw and SmackDown on different shows, right? So I was at both, but I only announced at SmackDown. So at Raw, we can hang out, me, you, and Cole or whatever, and hang out and play cards and just do that stuff while we're watching the show on the monitor, stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun being able to do that, you know?
Chumel, do you remember the time? So one time, Tommy, this is a true story. We got in trouble for playing cards during the day. And so we were trying to hide. So it was during Monday Night Raw, and we're playing in the shower. Okay. In
Yep.
the shower,
And who
in the
walked in?
pre-tapes room.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Who walked in? Shane McMahon. We literally fell on the ground like we had passed out from watching. We were trying to act like there were cards everywhere. Cards Oh my God. And then we were in Milwaukee one time, and me and Chimel were playing cards, and Shane sticks his head around the curtain again. He's like, I told you guys not to play cards during the show. We're like, but we're watching the show. We had the show up in the corner. Me and Chimel got in so much trouble from Shane, not from Vince. Remember that, Chimel?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, you played a lot with Cena too, right? Didn't you play cards a lot with Cena, Chimel?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he was always great. He loved playing cards,
Yeah.
and it was great because that's how we all, you wouldn't go crazy, and especially those overseas tours, we would sit there, drink wine or beer or whatever, and play cards,
I remember the overseas tours, Tony.
Oh yeah, they were great, but I mean they're just so grueling, and they do one in April after Mania or something, and then one in November, and it was like 2 weeks, and it was just God, it was so and I always said, why do they keep all these things that I used to say? It's like now, once I was gone, oh, now they're running less house shows. Oh, well, I just came up with that idea 20 years ago and no one ever listened. No, we keep running house shows.
That was the thing, Tony, is that we always, I don't know if you want to call it complained or discussed, but Vince was always so against reruns and having anything repeat anywhere that he took it out on us. And eventually we got to a point where the grind was just too much. And thank goodness now at least some guys are be able to take some time off. But I don't think fans at home realize truly what the grind was. How many days a year would you say you spent on the road?
Yeah. Well, if I did a month, I was probably away every month, probably like 20 to 24 days a month, depending on what we were doing. It'd be like just, I don't know. And it just got to be so, after 20 years of it, it was like ridiculous. And it was tough. And I mean, it took a lot away from my family, a lot away from my wife and stuff like that, and the kids and all that. And, but you had to make a living. And it was like, you just go and do it. Now, when I get on a plane, and I'm like, how the hell did I do this for 35 years or 38 years? And I'm like, I can't even fathom it, doing it. And
not today.
When you're in the moment, I think you're just in the moment and you just go and you do, as opposed to stopping and thinking about it.
Hey, Tony, one of the biggest superstars ever in the WWE was Edge. How did you get that gig to announce him? And how was it for you? Special for you? Was it every time he was on Raw, SmackDown, or a pay-per-view that you got to do that?
Oh, the super thing? Yeah, well, me and Corderis used to drive around a lot in the rental cars. Me, Corderis, Larry, the trainer, and we would always just talk about bullshit or anything like that and just how to save the world or just talking about anything that we went through. And, if you ever seen the old Bugs Bunny or Roadrunner cartoons where Wile E. Coyote says something and it's like Wile E. Coyote, super genius, So we when somebody did something stupid, we would say, "Oh yeah, Wile E. Coyote, super genius." So when Super Crazy came to the WWE, I was like, "Oh, let me say Soup." I would just do it at like live events and stuff like that. So I've been making his way to the ring super crazy, you know. And then when Edge got his thing, I started doing it with him, and he really liked it, you know. And I used to announce Cena. I used to say like John Cena, and Edge was kind of like, "Hey, you give him all this stuff, you know? How about a little something for me?" So then I started with the super.
Give it to us right now. Give us the rated R superstar.
Yeah.
The rated R superstar Edge. And you know, when I have a cameo. So if anyone's interested in a cameo, they can always look me up. A little self promotion.
Shameless
Oh
plug.
my God,
Shameless
Tommy!
plug.
I eventually I knew we'd get to this.
There was an
I'd
angle
like to order my
somewhere.
cameo.
It's at Tony Chimel 6986.
How much you
and
charge
it's
for
really
a
not
cameo?
called a cameo. It's not really called a cameo. It's more of a chimeo, I call it. You know.
All right, how much do you charge? How much do you charge for a chimeo?
Well, I think my rate is like $35 or something like that. So anybody can do it. But let's face it, I can announce anybody as a superstar, and I do.
So if you get any, because I just got one yesterday, and I actually charge a little more than that for a coachio, I suppose. But if
Really?
you get any in the next week, a coachio, yes. So if you get any in the next week, you can cut us in for 20% because this is the biggest platform that you've been on in years. So you're welcome. You're welcome, Tony Chimel.
So you think that both people might order one then?
That ain't right, dude.
That ain't right. Not even
No.
close. All right, so let's stay with the superstar theme for a second because I know with the merch guys that all the superstars were always coming up to them with ideas and they had to learn how to say no. I'm assuming that the same was true with you because how you're announced, how you're promoted, how you're seen in your entrance video, it's everything to these guys and gals. What were some of the superstars you enjoyed working with to collaborate on how they wanted their entrance and their announcement to sound?
You know, they usually never really came to me with something specific, but I would just like, different talents you would have to, just hit the syllable a little bit harder here or there. Undertaker was always a good one to announce, and there were certain times when you had to do it. You wanted to try and wait for like the bongs to hit, and then you would announce them or something like that. And, like Stone Cold Steve Austin or, Triple H and these guys. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I just started doing it like way back in the day from nothing, and it just kind of evolved. And the more you did it, the more you got better at it. And I don't want to say it came natural to me, but it was just something that progressed. And I just kept going with it, and they were happy with it. So I was happy with it too.
That's going to be on his headstone, Tommy. From nothing to this. Tony Chimel.
How is it working with Kevin Dunn when you did the ring announcing?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to answer that one?
Yeah.
When I had to do a special announcement at TV, I would get a little nervous, So, and Yaten, I love Yaten. He was always by my side, the timekeeper there, Mark Yaten. And every time I made an announcement, and I know it was special, I would say first to Yaten, are they saying anything on headset? Did they say it was good? Did they say it was bad? Anything, He's like, no, they're not saying anything. So to me, that was like the best compliment in the world because you never got that was a great announcement. You
Never.
Just got whether you were the drizzling shits or not, And so no news was good news to me on that.
For people who don't know, sorry to cut you off, Kevin Dunn is probably, he is the person behind all WrestleMania. He is the creative genius, and you got to give him his props but he was sitting in that producer's chair for over 30 years. And if you saw WrestleMania or Raw or SmackDown or any look, he was behind it. Now, with all that being said, he was not the easiest person to work for, and all three of us worked for him. And he was probably the highest paid producer maybe in TV at one point. We're talking $5 to $10 million a year. And he was terrifying because he only had to answer to Vince. That was it. That was it. So you can see why Tony, you have Kevin Dunn PTSD even in
Yeah.
2024, Tony.
Yeah.
You do.
You know, Kevin called me twice in my entire career on the telephone. The first time he called me and let me know that I was furloughed. And the second time he called me and let me know that I was let go.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting
Well, at
for the
least you got a
third
phone
time.
call.
I always tell people, I said, yeah, he's going to call me one more time and tell me that I'm dead. Okay.
I'll make that call for you, Tony.
Gee, thanks, coach. I appreciate that he did call me and let me know that I was let go, because not everybody gets a call from him telling him that. But,
Yeah, I got the call too, Tony. And
yeah,
I wanted to follow that up a little bit. That when I got the call, it was just devastating to me. What was your first reaction to that when he told you you're not part of the company and you got all these years just like me, and it just suddenly stops
yeah.
right there? And I got to tell you, man, I was depressed for a very long time. How did you react to when he called you?
Yeah, I went through all the emotions too. But, when we first stopped running shows, because I remember I was getting ready to go to Detroit, I think. I came back from Washington, D.C., and was off for like a day or two when this whole COVID thing was going down. And I was getting ready to go to Detroit. And I called my boss, Sean, and I'm like, what's going on with Detroit? Are we doing the show? Are we not doing the show? What should I do? He's like, just go like we're doing the show. If you hear something from me, then you'll hear and you'll know. But at least you're on your way. So I went. I had a connection flight to Charlotte. I'm in Charlotte. He calls up. He's like, Chimel, turn around and come home because we're not running shows. But then they were running those shows in Orlando. And I was always like, hey, I'll go to the show. I only live like 3 or 4 hours from Orlando. I said, I'll go to the shows. And they're like, no, we don't need you. We got it and all this. And, so I was never that. And I was never doing those shows. And then when he called me, it was probably about a week or so before Kevin called me to tell me I was fired. I was sent an email and it said, some people are going to be coming back in November. Some people are going to be coming back in December. And I'm going to be coming back in December. And I was talking with some of the merch guys too, and they were coming back in November or something. So when Kevin called me, he's like, Tony, I got good news and bad news. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, the good news is that you're going to start receiving your paycheck again. And I'm like, yeah, I heard that. I'm going to be coming back in December. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, yeah, I got this email from Human Resources saying that I'm going to be coming back in December. And he said, who sent you that email? And I said, it was Jim Johnstone. I think that's the guy from HR, right? Or was the guy? So he's like, send me that email, So I forwarded it to him, but he's like, well, we're gonna have to let you go, And I was mad like you were, Tommy. It sucked, and I was bitter, and f them, and But I'll tell you what, I didn't think that life could be any good after WWE, and I'm finding out it's fantastic. I'm loving it. Let's face it, guys. I've been home now for like 4 or 5 years, and the wife hasn't killed me yet. So that's a plus, you
Well, that's
know.
the biggest shocker of all time. That she actually stayed with you now that you're home after all these years. She had the greatest scenario.
We went through like 30 years of seeing each other maybe 5 or 6 times a month. And in my head, I'm like,
Right.
I'm going to see this girl now every single day. I said, what's going to happen to me? And it's worked out. God bless her. She's the best.
You're super happy. You're working at Trader Joe's. And I tell people all the time, hey, you got to work until you're 70 or 80 years old. That's just the way the world works. And if you can find something else you're happy with, good for you. But you also have your toe in the AEW water a little bit. And there's been so many stories about AEW versus WWE, and very few people know both places. What has it been like there?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's so much more relaxing there. And there's a lot of people from WWE over there, wrestler wise, talent wise, backstage people wise, and stuff like that. but there's a lot of people back there, and it doesn't seem like it's like this to you, like everything's on top of you, and it seems like a little bit more easier backstage. Tony Khan's very approachable. When I first met him, he's like, hey Tony, he knew who I was. He's like, yeah, I grew up watching you and stuff like that. And, near the end there, Vince, you could see the line out by the door, and there's only certain people that are going in to talk to him and see him. And I always say, like, Vince kind of had his own little bubble, and with Tony, there's not really a bubble. And it's I love it. I mean, they're great people to work for. The shows to me is every bit as good as far as lighting and sound and all that other stuff, and talent wise, it's WWE. It just, it's got to get the feet rolling a little bit more,
Yeah.
But it's very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I love me some Trader Joe's too. I would have never thought, all the stories I hear about retail and all this other stuff, and people hate it. This job is unbelievable, and the people there to work for are unbelievable. And when I first got hired, I was taking my wife, who's a hairdresser, to work, and this is when I didn't have a job, and I was just getting my severance pay. And she's like, there's a Trader Joe's opening up here. Why don't you go in there and see? I said, I don't even know what a Trader Joe's is.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a Pier 1 Imports, because we never grew up near Trader Joe's. I thought it was like an antique place.
You didn't know what Trader Joe's was?
Didn't even know it was a grocery store. So I go in there. And the first thing I loved about it is I was able to fill out a regular application. None of this online crap, where if I can talk to you, you'll hire me. If I'm just one in 1,000 bullcrap emails, that you don't know who I am to somebody else,
Yeah.
So I go in there, I fill out the application, I hand it in, and a guy comes out and he says, he's like, are you really Tony Chimel from WWE? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, come on back. So I start telling him he's a huge fan. He's like, I watch all the time. I watched you ring announce this and that, And I'm thinking to myself, like, I got this job if I want it, So we talk, and they ended up hiring me. And I love working there. Now, the thing that I had to get used to the most was standing on my feet for 8 hours. That was the worst.
We've had Gabriel Iglesias, world famous, DDP and Cody Rhodes, world famous, and now this, Tommy Carlucci. Yeah. We're talking Trader Joe's.
I bet you work in the deli department.
He said he's on his feet all 8 hours. Now, which brings us to this, because we could talk all day. Even though I don't want to, we could talk all day. But there's one very important subject before we let you get out of here, Tony, and get back to Trader Joe's. And we'll have you on again in a year or two to continue the conversation. We don't need to get rid of all of our good content right now. But there has been a topic that has been a crawl in my side for damn near 20 years. And we're going to settle it right here, right now. For people watching Behind the Turnbuckle that have never heard this story before, I've told it, but just not with the other man, my nemesis, sitting on the screen. So if you'll indulge me just for a second. 20 years ago, Tom, you were there. And me and Tony Chimel, and Tony, stop me if I say anything that's not true. All right? I want to make sure that everything is true. So we got into an argument about who could win a 1-mile race. And it ballooned into this whole big promotion. It was bigger than that month's pay-per-view. That's how big it was. We built it up for 2 full months. Tony Chimel's wife came to me. I'm saving lives, Tommy Carlucci, saving lives, because he lost over 40 pounds training for this race. And the date was going to be in State College, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Penn State University. We're in the arena, and right across the road, there is a track.
Yes.
3-camera shoot. And leading up to it, we had press conferences. You had a benefactor that to this day, you would never admit who bought you all the new tracksuits, all the new shoes. You had a different pair of shoes every single week. Who was your benefactor?
I have no idea.
It's 20 years. You can let the cat out of the bag. Who was it?
Why would I do that?
Okay. Well, I believe it was. I believe it was Shane McMahon.
Anybody.
I believe it was Shane McMahon. I believe it was Shane McMahon.
Okay.
So the Rock gets involved. And the original bet, Tommy, was I had to beat Tony Chimel by 30 seconds to win the race because I was a much better athlete than he was. And so in one of our press
I'll correct
conferences,
you there because you're wrong, but go ahead.
I was in the ring. He was announcing my name. So the Rock gets up. The Rock gets up at one of these press conferences, and it's packed. And this is like 3:00 on a Tuesday afternoon. It was so stupid. We were acting like 8-year-olds, and we loved every second of it. Yeah. So the Rock then goats me into increasing it to a minute. So I had to beat him by a minute.
I remember.
All right?
Yeah.
I still thought, you know what? There's no chance that he breaks the 8-minute mark. And I know I can run a 7 sub minute. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So he loses 40 pounds. The day of the race comes, and I had been fighting some back issues. But I didn't tell anybody. I was just like, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to do it and beat him anyway, even though my back has been locking up in training for weeks. So we get out there.
You mean
so
both
far, he hasn't
days
stopped
that
me
you
telling me
trained
everything.
for this race?
So we have 3 cameras. We have 3 golf carts. Michael Cole, voice of the WWE, and The Rock were on commentary for this race. Yeah. The fans were on the outside of the track. WWE personnel on the inside of said track. So we start the race, and I'm out to a huge lead. And by the way, the loser had to do 100 push-ups, one at a time, and say, I am the other person's bitch, wherever they made them do it. That was the bet.
I believe if I lost, I would have had to say I'm a fat piece of shit. But
it could have been something like that. Could have been something like that. Could have been something like that. So I can't remember the exact verbiage. I mean, here or there. So I'm out to a big lead, Tommy. I'm out to a big lead. I'm going around 1, going around 2, going around 3. And I feel like I've got this in the bag. He's way behind me. And to this day, this is where the story takes a nasty left turn. Because Tony Chimel has been telling the world for 20 years that he beat me in said race. He won the bet. He did not beat me. I crossed the finish line first, and then he came in after me within that minute's time. Is that or is that not true, Tony Chimel?
Well, I will tweak it a little bit, okay?
Okay.
If you remember, you had to beat me by a minute. So
yes.
I had the option. We could either start at the same time or I would have a minute head start, okay?
Correct.
So I decided we're going to start at the same time.
Yes.
I don't know where this large lead is that you got out from ahead of me.
I was half a lap ahead of you, at least.
No, you were maybe like a quarter lap because I'm like, well, let me just keep up with them a little bit here and see how it's going. So we go around the track the first time, and I'm like, okay, this is all right. Now we go around the second time. I'm like, well, he's going to have to start opening it up because I'm only, 10, 15 seconds behind him probably. So now we go around the third time. He still didn't open it up. Now we're around the fourth time, and I'm like, damn, I still feel pretty good. I'm going to start kicking it. So I started running and running. I almost caught you. Yes, you did cross the finish line first.
Thank you.
And I do know this. You ran the mile in 6 minutes and 35 seconds. I ran it in 6 minutes and 36 seconds. So you beat me by a second.
First of all, I ran in 6:29. Don't take 6 seconds away from me. All right. But that's the greatest part about this story is that we're talking about 2 dudes who are not runners, and we ran in sub 6:30, which was crazy. I mean, that's a really good number for anybody. So I had no issues losing the bet. My issue was he then started telling the world that he won the race. And that for 20 years has really stuck in me. So thank you for admitting that I won the race. Now, the fun part came afterwards. Because Tony Chimel.
I remember how all this started because I told you we were probably playing cards in the pre-tapes room or whatever. But I said, hey, I'm going to start trying to lose weight. I started jogging on the treadmill. And you said, Coach, you said, really? How fast are you running a mile? And I said, I would do like a mile in like 10 minutes. You're like, that sucks. I beat you in a race, no problem. And that's where the snowball started.
It did. And if you would have won in 10 minutes, that would have sucked because I would have beat you by 3.5 minutes. So I was actually accurate. But the reason I tell this story is, A, I love Tony Chimel to death. But what we did afterwards is what, to me, the business was all about. It's the memories I take away, because we had to do it one push-up at a time, and I had to say I'm Tony Chimel's bitch every single time. Here are some of the places, Tommy Carlucci, that I had to do a push-up, which was incredibly embarrassing at the time. We were on a 5 a.m. flight out of Grand Forks, North Dakota, or someplace in a very cold place. And back then, you could actually, they let people on the microphone. It was before all the crazy stuff happened. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting in my seat at 5:30 in the morning, and I hear his stupid voice on the loudspeaker going, "Can the man in seat 7A please get out to the aisle, get down, and give me a push-up?" And I had to do a push-up in front of the whole plane at 5:30 in the morning.
And it was all WWE people. So
all WWE, like 5 civilians and all WWE people. We were at the Pentagon one time, me and Triple H. He calls Triple H on the phone. Triple H is on the phone. I'm going, why is he? I'm over here talking. All of a sudden, Triple H says, "Hey, you have a phone call. Chimel made me do it in front of all these troops at the Pentagon." Sergeant Slaughter had a golf tournament down at Doral in Miami.
We get a call.
Yeah, I had to do a push-up there, Tommy, for Sarge, beloved Sergeant Slaughter. All these different places, one at a time. And that was just a blast, because we drew that out for years.
Yeah.
Didn't we, Tony?
Yeah.
Years.
Coach, I remember we were at a wedding. We were all at a wedding. He calls, and he said, "Do it now." And you had to get down in front of everybody. We were there. I forgot whose wedding it was.
Was it my? I think it was my wedding.
It probably was your wedding.
I think it was my wedding.
Yeah.
That your son DJ'd.
Yes. Yep.
I should have known right there that
Little
that
Tommy
marriage was
is
not going to
not
work
a
out.
DJ.
There you go.
He's not a DJ.
But I think about all those moments, Chimel, and we were so excited to have you on today, because all kidding aside, those were the greatest times in our lives. And
right,
life goes on, and you do what you do. But as we wrap this up, if you can kind of just when you take away your entire career and everything that you did, probably the most unique career maybe ever in the WWE, what's your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, let me say this about the race, Coach. You did lose the bet, but I'll tell you what, you were the best sport whenever it came to you having to do a push-up. You did them, and there was never a problem, and I always respected that. Thank you very much. You know, when I got let go, I had all those emotions, like Tommy was saying, you know, with the bitterness, you know, F you, and, you know. But now when you look back, I'm like, geez, that was a really great career. I mean, I was there from the time I was like 21, 22 years of age until the time I was, I don't know, 56, 57, 58, something like that, you know? And it's like, there's your whole life, basically. And now it's like, now if you said come back, I'd be like, no, I don't want to come back. You know,
Really?
I like it. You know, I wouldn't want to do it full time. That's for sure.
Right.
You know, but, you know, it was a great experience. Traveling is a really great teacher, and you get to know and learn a lot of things when you travel. And we traveled a hell of a lot, way too much for my liking later on in my life. But, you know, you get to see a lot of cool places, and, you know, and do a lot of nice things. And I'm very grateful for the time that I had there. And, you know, I'm lucky that I want to say I'm lucky that I lasted that long, but you know what? I was pretty good too.
Yeah,
so,
you were great. You were great.
So I kind of think that I was lucky to get the job, but I think I was good to keep the job. Is the way I look at it. You know.
Yeah.
And you met a lot of good friends, a lot of good people, and I still have those friends and people today. So.
Yeah, I mean, me and Tommy aren't two of them, but you absolutely do, Tony. You absolutely do. I will say this: the whole reason we started this show is I was talking to Tommy. I was like, you know what? I think people need to hear the stories, not just of the superstars, not just of the big Undertakers and Triple H's, but of everybody.
Yeah.
And today is one of those days, which is the reason we started this show, and I absolutely love it. So thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. We'll do it again.
Okay.
Yes? We got a lot more stories to tell. We're just not going to do a 4-hour podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the one. He is the only. Tony Chimel here on Behind the Turnbuckle. Be good,
Thank
brother.
you, guys.
Well, Tommy, that kind of went how I thought it would go.
Woo!
He is all over the place.
Boy.
But he's what made our time there fun in the WWE. You had to have fun all throughout the day or you'd go crazy.
Absolutely, he would lighten up your day, and let's not get it conflicted here. He had a lot of responsibility later on in his career, where he would be there at 5 in the morning and not leave until 1 in the morning. So that was a big schedule he had. Besides being backstage and working on the rooms there and setting them up and everything. But he had such a great sense of humor in the way he treated everybody. He's such a great guy. I'm glad we had him on today, and he delivered. I got to tell you that. He delivered today, Coach.
I don't think I've ever played cards with somebody more than with Tony Chimel. And it's funny because everybody has those people in their lives where they're like, man, why is he in our group? You're like, man, I would run through a wall for that guy. I would protect him till the ends of the earth because that's the heart that Tony Chimel has.
Absolutely.
And good on you, Trader Joe's, by the way.
Yes.
All right. So, Tony, we've got another great guest the next couple of weeks. The Godfather's coming up. Lisa Marie, formerly Victoria, is coming up on the show. We're going to have Jeff Jarrett later this summer. So we've got a lot of big ones. And also, we've been thinking about starting a separate episode. So we want you to comment here on our page if you'd like to see an interview behind the turnbuckle, but also when we did the stars things, Tommy, that got really rave reviews and a big view count. So maybe we do the top 3 or 5 storylines of the week and do those episodes from time to time. If you guys would like to see that, add it here, and we will continue to grow as we do. Also, we're thinking about live Q&As, live watch-alongs with pay-per-views. So we're thinking about starting that in the next couple of weeks too, Tommy. That could be great.
That will be phenomenal, Coach. We get to really talk to our fans that are subscribed and create new content for this brand that we have right now, and I think it's going to be fantastic.
All right, you guys asked for. We're going to continue to give you more, but for now, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Behind the Turnbuckle for Big Tommy C. I am the coach and producer man behind the scenes. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Just thank you for allowing us to do all of this, which we absolutely love. We'll see you next week right here on BTT.